Happy Monday, folks, and welcome to Hurricane Hub Live here on 13 News Now Plus. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tim Pandajis. Let's get it rolling. We've got some stuff to talk about tonight on HHL. Could the Atlantic be brewing something on up out there? We're 6 weeks in, roughly, to the hurricane season here in 2025, at least out in the Atlantic Basin. We've had 3 named storms already. Could Dexter be on the way? Here are our tropic topics for today. We've got an area of interest out in the Atlantic, just sitting off the coast of the east coast of Florida, that has been tagged as Invest 93L. Now, hurricane hunters are actually expected to conduct a recon low-level mission into the circulation that's out there off the east coast of Florida that's building inland. Tomorrow, around midday or so, I think they're scheduled to launch out of Keesler Air Force Base at around noontime or so. There is growing potential for development, though. The latest outlook from the National Hurricane Center that just dropped within the last 30 minutes does increase the odds for development in the short range and as well as the long range 2- and 7-day time frame. And we could be looking at our 4th name of the 2025 season, which would be Dexter. Okay, let's get a kind of a refresher on what exactly an Invest is, right? So right now the system has been tagged as Invest 93L. Invest is just short for investigative area. It's a tropical wave that the Hurricane Center meteorologists want to track for possible development. Now, 93 is just a record number. It cycles between 90 and 99. Once we get to 99, we just go right back to 90. And an L is the basin indicator. It tells us it's in the Atlantic. If it had an E after it, it would tell us that it's in the Eastern Pacific. So, of course, we're talking about the Atlantic Basin. There's an L. Now, referring back to climatology, right? So we had Chantal about, what was it, 10 days ago now? That happened about a month ahead of schedule, according to climatology. August 3rd, we typically get our 3rd named storm. Now, if Dexter does come along, say, in the next day or so, we'd roughly be about a month early on that as well. You can see here, typically on or around August the 15th, middle of August, we see our 4th named storm based off of the last 30 hurricane seasons. So, again, revisiting our list so far this year, we've had 3 named storms. Andrea, Barry, Chantal, all were tropical storms. Strongest was Chantal at 50-mile-per-hour winds. Now, the next name on the list is Dexter, and Dexter is a new addition to the 2025 list. Again, they rotate every 6 years. So this year's list is the 2019 list. Think back, what D-named storm was retired in 2019? Dorian. Category 5 powerhouse that rolled on through in 2019 in August. And do you remember that? It was a Category 5 when it slowed down and stalled over the Great Abaco Island of the Bahamas. It was pretty much stalking the east coast of Florida. Never made landfall there. In fact, didn't bring many impacts aside from increased surf and storm surge and things like that. Never saw any of the strongest winds make it onshore of Florida. Then it took a turn due north, pretty much straddled the southeast coast and made landfall Cape Hatteras as a Category 2 hurricane, I believe, at that point, because it encountered increased wind shear and it began to weaken, thankfully. But it is tied for first place, right up with the 1935 hurricane, Labor Day hurricane. Strongest landfalling Atlantic hurricane, okay? It was a Cat 5 max intensity, 185-mile-per-hour winds. It was an absolute beast as it just ransacked portions of the Bahamas. So Dexter replace that. Dorian was the only name retired back in the 2019 season. All right, here's the main entree. This is tropical wave Invest 93L. Now, odds of this developing now up from 20 and 30% to 30 and 40%. That makes it at moderate risk of developing at 40% over the next 7 days. If it was to develop, it won't take that long to develop. It'll likely be within the next 48 to 72 hours after it makes it into the Northeast Gulf. Okay, it is forecast to move west, which is a little bit unusual. Now, you have to factor in the steering mechanisms in place. High pressure to the north kind of pushing this a little bit farther to the west. Usually they're moving in the opposite direction, but this one moving due west here in the next couple of days. Now, what you're looking at here is infrared satellite imagery. And overall, it kind of looks like a giant shrimp, right? It's not very well organized, which is why it's not a depression. It's not a tropical storm. Right now, it's just a disorganized cluster of thunderstorms that may be on the organizing trend. I want to switch things up and show you something that's pretty glaring that's keeping it from intensifying at this time. Visible satellite imagery here. We got to go back to when the sun was up. but this is just a couple hours ago. And you can see the center here is depicted from the hurricane center on the northern periphery of this cluster of convection here. And if you look closely, you can see that there is wind shear coming in from the north, and that is blowing off the tops of the thunderstorm clouds to the south and southwest, exposing the low-level center here that you can see spinning here with some low-level clouds ejecting off to the north and west there. Wind shear is definitely impacting the system right now. It is expected, though, to move west, move over the Florida Peninsula. Of course, land interaction is not going to speed up in intensification, so it'll probably plateau, maybe even weaken a little bit. But the resultant circulation as it hits the Northeast Gulf should encounter some marginally favorable conditions to try to get its act together. That is dependent on if it does stay over open water. Some models do want to drift it inland and pretty much hug the Gulf Coast. Others take it farther to the south, which would put it over water for longer, meaning probably a stronger storm. Here's what our short-range model shows here. Again, a cluster of disorganized thunderstorms moving over central Florida and then emerging into the Northeast Gulf. Here it encounters marginally favorable conditions, and notice that as we get to the last frame, we start to see maybe a center of circulation developing here, almost due south of Pensacola and Tallahassee. Now, also what this kind of shows us is what we were dealing with here on the east side of Florida, in the southwest Atlantic, some wind shear. When we've got a low-level center here, or a center of circulation, but notice where all of the convection, as showed here on this model, is located due south of the center. So modeling possibly showing some more wind shear coming in from the north here, keeping this overall a weaker system by the time we get to midweek. Is this set in stone? No. It's certainly up in the air right now. Conditions could change in terms of wind shear, but overall, marginally favorable conditions look pretty likely right now. And here's kind of a general feel for how the models are seeing things, okay? So we've got it located right now just to the east of the east coast of Florida. Now, if it takes the green track here, which is pretty much what the GFS model is showing, it takes it more of a northern track, not over water for long, so little, if any, tropical development here. It could just be a large cluster of tropical downpours, really. Then there is the slightly farther south track here that the European model is showing. Keeps it over water for longer, so this would give it time to maybe strengthen to a tropical depression or tropical storm, which would give it a name, which would be Dexter, as we've gone over. And then there are a few other longer range models that show it taking a little farther track south, meaning it's over open water for much longer, and bringing it possibly over towards, between Galveston and maybe New Orleans, somewhere along the Gulf Coast there of southern Louisiana. So that would make it a stronger storm. It would be possible if that was to take that southern track. So all three are kind of equal odds right now. Until we see this emerge off into the Northeast Gulf, then we'll get a better feel for what circulation remains there. All in all, it's going to be tropical downpours bringing a lot of rainfall to the coastal areas. We could be seeing up to 2 to 4 inches over to New Orleans, Tallahassee 1 to 2, just north of Tampa 1 to 2 inches as well. So definitely impactful here in terms of heavy rainfall. There could be some isolated instances here of maybe some flooding conditions in areas that are normally vulnerable to it, like New Orleans. But we'll see exactly where it makes landfall if, in fact, it does strengthen enough to have a center of circulation here in the coming days. Certainly something to watch. Elsewhere in the Atlantic Basin, it's just crickets. Not much going on out there. However, we're starting to see much more activity in terms of convection here. Some of this may be associated with the intertropical convergence zone, but starting to see a few little pieces kind of disconnect from that main zone there and showing at least some marginally stable conditions here to keep the intensity going there. These have survived for a while. And now we've also got a few more tropical waves here coming off the coast of Africa. So maybe showing a little bit more favorability and not as much sinking motion as we've seen so far this year. And there is dust still out there, but a lot of it is off to the north of where those convective clusters are. Now in the eastern Pacific, still quiet there. It's been about a week now since we've had any activity or any areas of interest, and we still don't have any here, even though this one looks like it's starting to organize a little bit, but it is moving into more unfavorable conditions as you get into the colder waters, sea surface temperatures farther to the north and west there. But overall, quieter eastern Pacific could lend to lower wind shear as we get out into the Atlantic Basin. All right, let's revisit last Friday's tropical trivia. In an average year, I asked how many hurricanes form in the Atlantic. Is it 4, 5, 6, or 7? The average amount of hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin, based off of 30-year seasons, 30 seasons is 7 hurricanes. Okay, and if we look at the outlook for this year, NOAA and CSU are both calling for above normal amounts of hurricane development. 6 to 10 from NOAA, 8 from Colorado State. By the way, they've downed this by a number each. So down to 16, down to 8, down to 3. Originally was 17, 9, and 4. And the average season is 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 of those becoming major Category 3 or greater. And opposed to last year, 18 named storms, 11 hurricanes, and 5 were major. So we'll see where 2025 ends up. All right, let's get to today's trivia question. According to climatology, what date is considered the peak of the Atlantic hurricane season? Is it the middle of August on the 15th? Is it September 10th? Is it Labor Day weekend? Or is it September 21st, right around the first day of fall? The answer tomorrow on HHL. Now, in the meantime, I want you to scan the QR code to download the 13 News Now Hurricane Guide. It is information on supplies you should have on hand, emergency numbers you might need, and a whole lot more. And you can find that right there on 13 News Now. And make sure to join us right here for Hurricane Hub Live every weekday at 8 p.m. We'll see you right back here at 8 o'clock tomorrow.